Welcome, everyone, as we celebrate Child Abuse Prevention Month. I'm Jeff Dion. I'm an attorney, a victim advocate, and a survivor. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will experience sexual abuse before the age of 18. In 2021, Minnesota had more than 1,300 confirmed victims of child sex abuse. But that doesn't paint the whole picture, because we know that 90% of victims will never disclose their abuse to law enforcement, and 30% will never disclose to anyone. There are 60 million survivors of child sexual abuse in America. Zero Abuse Project was created to protect children from abuse and sexual assault. We can eliminate child abuse in America, but there are some obstacles. Most kids don't disclose, and if they do disclose, it's not reported. Even if it's reported, oftentimes it's not investigated. And even if it's investigated, sometimes it isn't done properly. To eradicate this scourge, we have to attack this problem from a number of different angles and make clear that everyone has a role to play in keeping kids safe. Now, this isn't some pie-in-the-sky idealism. I know we can do this because I've seen how far we've already come. Back in 2005, Victor Veith, our Chief Program Officer, made 3 recommendations. First, colleges and universities should offer experiential education to students pursuing careers in child protection. Today, our Child Advocacy Studies Program, or CAST, is in more than 90 colleges and universities in 30 states. With more resources, we can be in more schools. Second, in a child sex abuse case, where the evidence is what the victim says versus what the defendant says, that's not enough for a prosecutor to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. But an effective forensic interview can yield between 20 and 40 pieces of corroborating evidence, which can help make the prosecutor's case. That's why Victor's second recommendation was that every state should establish a forensic interview training program. Back then, only a handful had them. Today, 37 states have done so, and 23 of those states have chosen our Child First protocol. Zero Abuse Project is setting the standard for excellence in this critical area. Prosecution is an essential element of prevention. One study showed that 561 non-incarcerated sex offenders accounted for the sexual abuse of 195,000 children. Think about that. When we fail to convict an abuser, they're free to abuse more kids. And the victim feels that they weren't believed and that telling doesn't matter anyway. For prosecutors to be successful, they've got to be trained, because 99% of law schools don't teach this. Prosecutors need to be trained to work with a multidisciplinary team, to know what a forensic interview is, how to get it admitted into evidence, and how to leverage it in their case. A 3-hour training class for prosecutors costs $1,000. Imagine how many more kids' cases would benefit from more of them. Our work is referred to as training and technical assistance. The training part consists of teaching prosecutors things they don't know. The technical assistance part is about working with them individually to help them figure out, how would I implement that in my county or in a particular case? In just a minute, you'll hear from County Attorney Jenna Peterson how important that direct assistance has been to her community. The U.S. Department of Justice has named Zero Abuse Project the official training provider on the effective prosecution of child abuse cases. The need, that's great, absolutely. And the need is greater than ever. But the amount of money dedicated to training prosecutors about child abuse is just 1/3 of what it was 15 years ago. We can make a difference. And it's so important to train those prosecutors to be able to do this. Victor's, almost all of our funds are used to provide that training, and there's not enough resources left to provide that really important direct technical assistance. We can provide 8 hours of direct technical assistance to a prosecutor for just $1,000. Third, Victor recognized that if everyone has a role to play in keeping kids safe, then we have to enlist the support of our faith community. And that's why we created the Center for Faith and Child Protection, to help train faith leaders on how to protect children from abuse within their congregation, and also how to appropriately respond to disclosures of abuse that occurred elsewhere. One 2-day keeping faith training costs $5,000. And we need more of those to protect children in all our faith communities. Our work has expanded beyond Victor's initial recommendations, and we make impacts in other ways. Our Jacob Wetterling Resource Center has a sex abuse prevention curriculum called Empower Me, and it has been named one of the top 5 in the nation. Thanks to the stewardship, that's it. And thanks to the stewardship of Senators Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith, the federal budget that was signed into law last month included $1.2 million for Zero Abuse Project to expand our prevention work in Minnesota. Let's celebrate that. We're also working on state legislation that would require a child abuse prevention curriculum in every school district in Minnesota. That legislation has passed the Senate and will now be conferenced with the House. Our 11 for Jacob campaign engages entire communities in powerful prevention messages so that kids are smart, not scared. Survivor Space is our online portal that provides information, resources, and peer support to adult survivors of child sex abuse. And our exciting new Nova tool helps automate data collection for law enforcement so that investigators can spend their time analyzing the data rather than trying to find it. It costs $10,000 a month for us to provide this critical tool to police departments around the country. I'm proud that the federal government has such confidence in our work, and we'll receive over $3 million in grant funds this year for specific projects. But as you've heard, the grants don't cover everything, and that's why we need your help. No one likes to think about the darkness surrounding sexually abused children. But it's in the darkest skies that we find the brightest stars. We need you to light a path of safety, prevention, and recovery for these children. We need you. Everyone has a role to play in keeping kids safe. What will you do?
My name is Jenna Peterson. I began my career as a prosecutor in 2014, and since 2017, I have served as the Redwood County Attorney. The reason I stand before you today is because of a 12-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. She courageously sat in open court with her abuser staring at her and told 12 adult strangers what her stepfather did to her in her basement bedroom every morning when he woke her up for school. And we lost that case. And as I sat there in complete disbelief at the jury's verdict, I made a promise to every victim that would come after her on my caseload that we would do better, because I firmly believed we could. I first crossed paths with Zero Abuse Project in 2018, and from day one, I knew it was the start of something special. The relationship forged with Zero Abuse Project has been the catalyst we needed in a rural, primarily agricultural county in southwest Minnesota with a population of just 15,500 to overhaul the investigation and prosecution of these cases, to do better. Cases involving child abuse are some of the most difficult cases to prosecute. To support victims through the justice system and to hold offenders accountable for their appalling actions, it takes a village. As prosecutors, we have to convince a jury of 12 of all of you beyond a reasonable doubt that the perpetrator is guilty. This is why Zero Abuse is essential. We use their training and their technical assistance regularly. Zero Abuse staff attorneys and child abuse experts review and brainstorm strategic approaches to actual files that come across our desk. Together, we develop trainings uniquely tailored to the needs of Redwood County. These trainings bring together the village, law enforcement, mental health providers, advocates, social workers, and prosecutors. In 2018, we began using forensic interviews in our child abuse cases. In 2020, we drafted a legal argument for the admission of a forensic interview as evidence. Our argument persuaded the judge to allow a jury to watch a forensic interview for the very first time in our courtroom. While this may seem insignificant, it laid the groundwork for the admissibility of every single forensic interview of a child disclosing sexual abuse in Redwood County. Thanks to Zero Abuse's assistance, this is one battle in these cases we no longer have to fight. And since then, we have yet to receive a ruling finding a forensic interview inadmissible, and I promise you that is not the case in every Minnesota county. So the magnitude of that precedent is immeasurable to the work that we do. In 2021, we received a report from a 15-year-old girl who was sexually abused when she was 9 by her mother's boyfriend. 6 years after the abuse, she was ready to disclose, and our multidisciplinary team, we were ready to listen to her. We immediately set up a forensic interview, and during the forensic interview, she told the interviewer what he did to her. She was able to disclose in a light-filled room, seated on a comfortable couch across from a smiling, friendly face, rather than in a sterile interview room at a police station, seated on a hard plastic chair across from a police officer wearing a badge, a gun, and a uniform. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I love my police officers, and I can't do this job without them, but think of the effect that that has on a 15-year-old little girl who has to disclose being sexually abused. When her case went to trial, at just 15, she was brave enough to walk into a courtroom, sit in front of her abuser, because that's what the criminal justice system makes victims do, and testify, because she had been treated with respect and she had been supported through every step of the way. And yes, we played her forensic interview in the courtroom. This time, we got a conviction. And his home, her abuser's home for the next 20 years is a prison cell, all because she was brave enough to do this. This is a real-life example of the success we can attain when Zero Abuse Project is a part of our child abuse cases. Zero Abuse Project has filled gaping resource holes, and they have propelled systemic change in our investigation and prosecution of cases involving child abuse. But for me, Zero Abuse's impact runs deeper. These cases are grueling. They seem to never end, no matter how hard you work and how many hours you spend away from your own family. As a prosecutor, you sit with victims who tell you in horrifying detail what their perpetrator has done to them. You relive their most traumatic moments right along with them. You hear the shame in their voice, you see the fear in their eyes, and you feel every ounce of emotional weight they have carried since the moment the abuse began. And every case becomes personal, no matter how hard I try to keep my distance. And just when you're floating in the pure joy of a hug and a handshake from a victim and their family after a guilty verdict, you walk back to your office, and there on your desk is a police report staring back at you with the eyes of the next child who needs you to help them fight through the criminal justice system. So you take a deep breath, and the smile fades, and you go right back to work, and you do it over and over and over again. These cases will break you if you let them. But this is where Zero Abuse's intangibles come in. The Zero Abuse team is comprised of real people who get it because they've been in the battle. They are cheering, they are working, and they are fighting for the same things we are, to hold offenders accountable and to do better for victims. Having you all fill this room means we've added a couple hundred more to our village. With you all here, we are one giant step closer to a safer world for our children. So thank you, sincerely thank you for sitting in those chairs today. Please reach out anytime if you want to learn more about Zero Abuse's impact in the real world. We need so much more of it to do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you so much. Hello. My name is Anthony Edwards. I was that doctor who had pretty bad luck on that show ER. I also was a naval aviator who got in the back seat of the wrong fighter pilot's jet. You know, to this day, I do not trust short, good-looking actors. I am an actor, I'm a father, a husband, a good skier, a slow marathon runner, a lifelong traveler, a Formula One fan, a Dodger fan, a pretty good cook, and I'm also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. Thanks to trauma-informed care, group work, love and support from my family and friends, that last moniker, it no longer fuels the fear in my life. I have changed. Starting when I was 12 years old, the person that I loved, that I trusted, that inspired me so much, assaulted me. He broke something in me. That's something you're going to hear from a lot of survivors. Something in me broke. Because when you're a kid, your job is to love. That's your job. It's to love and be enthusiastic and trust in your surroundings. As a kid, that's your job, that's your business. And adults are supposed to set the boundaries and keep you safe. Something inside me broke that night of the assault, and the world, it went from being a safe place of trust and love to one of fear and unconditional or conditional relationships. Excuse me, I'm an actor and I have to use a script. But it's because I don't want to miss a thing. I was there in that situation because I wanted to be loved. It was my fault. I carried that most of my life in the form of shame. See, I had no way of understanding how I had been betrayed by a person I loved to satisfy a deep sickness. It's that betrayal by a person who used love as a weapon that put me right here today. A non-consensual sexual assault by a person I loved 47 years ago. I, like so many, have developed survival skills. Mine was to get really good at acting, creating alternate realities. I couldn't trust love, so I became a raging codependent. And love had become completely conditional. And that's why 7 years ago, I got involved with an organization called 1 in 6. because 1 in 6 men are survivors of childhood sexual abuse. In our country, that means that there are 30 million American men, most of whom are walking around and not talking about it. I didn't talk about it until I was 52 years old, 40 years after it happened. That's the average time it takes for men to disclose. And why don't men disclose? For so many, the basic stereotypes are socialized into us as children. Men don't cry. Men are tough. Men suck it up. Men get over it. Men move on. But the reality is, men don't move on. There's a crazy notion, there's a myth, that if a boy is abused, they will go on to abuse. That idea keeps men from coming forward. If you're a 30-year-old man and you're getting married, are you going to tell your wife that you're a survivor and let her just wonder if maybe you'll be a danger to your kids? The mythology that all abusers abuse is bullshit. It doesn't happen. But we do know one thing for sure, that for every one serial pedophile, there's 200 to 300 victims. The problem is we're dealing with stigma, and that's why 1 in 6 has been trying to change the stigma. But I have good news. It's possible. I've seen it happen. I have I've done this before. In the 90s, when I was on the show ER, I had perfectly healthy kids. And a friend of mine had an autistic child. And he started an organization called Cure Autism Now. And like Zero Abuse's goal to end abuse, they were going to cure autism. And they went after it with the passion, the same way that all of you are doing. And besides pursuing the science involved, they knew they had to break the stigma. The stigma at the time involved the idea that autism was caused by bad parenting and that there were no treatment protocols. But by simply telling the truth and shining a light, attitudes and perceptions changed. And I am so proud that after 5 years of working with this group, autism research, with our help, became a huge part of the Children's Health Act of 2000. And autism research funding went from 0 federal support to $80 million. We helped fix the problem. And it's really nice to see now that people take for granted that there's no shame in having an autistic child. But it wasn't always that way. We can end the stigma of child sex abuse. Ending stigma is the first step to ending abuse. There are, like I said, 30 million American men that can be part of Zero Abuse Project if we can help them find their voice, if we can give them a safe space to have that first conversation, that conversation that starts with, there's something that happened to me when I was a kid. When I was 16, my mom, she said to me, "Did Gary do anything inappropriate? I heard a rumor." I said, "Absolutely not." I was in tears at 16. There was no way I was going to tell my mother. I was filled with fear that if I told the truth, my world that had been centered around this perpetrator would be destroyed, and me with it. A world that was so powerful that even when directly asked by someone who cared only about my best interests, I froze. The denial was raging. Normalizing this conversation can help lower the age of disclosure. As you heard Jeff Dion say earlier, earlier disclosure leads to earlier intervention, which will protect even more kids from being abused. I believe in my heart that earlier disclosure also means getting help for survivors sooner, so that we can spare another boy the 40 years of secrecy, pain, and shame that I and millions of others have faced alone. There's an analogy of our cause that coincides with my story. When I publicly disclosed my abuse in 2017, because I was acting in a movie about the Menendez murders, where the defense was that the boys were sexually assaulted. It was central to the story of the film. I'd already begun my own recovery. I was working with professionals, and I was deep into trauma-informed therapy. it was going to be time to do publicity for the movie. And I realized that I couldn't pretend that I had no experience with the subject. Being silent would reinforce the shame. And it was the right time for me to say, it happened to me. I'd written something up, and just as I was about to have it published, Harvey Weinstein's story broke, and the Me Too movement exploded. That movement was wonderful, and it was full of women who needed to come together, get angry, and scream out, "You are not alone, it happened to me too," and it was fantastic. What I've come to learn, though, is that men, many men, are the opposite. They don't need to get angry. A lot of men are already angry. Their anger has led them to many different kinds of self-harming, and they are not going to benefit by more yelling. A lot of men need to get soft. They need to get quiet. They need to find someone they trust, and they need to have a conversation. I'm lucky enough that I've had the opportunity to speak on military bases. And the military is very open about trauma and PTSD because they have seen the effects of it. Anytime I speak at one of these, someone will come up to me after and say, "You know, it happened to me too, but it was no big deal." Men deny or minimize 100% of the time when they talk to me, because that's who we are. We're in a very scary time right now. Some people are still equating homosexuality and pedophilia. I mean, that's really insane. The vast majority of sexual assault on boys is done by heterosexual identifying men. Mine was. They perpetuate these myths to distract from the true problem, but that demonization still carries power, and power is what we validate. It's why this whole era has been so very triggering for male survivors. When you have powerful people who are corruptible and lying, not naming any names, it's all about power and control. It wasn't about sex for the man who abused me. It was about power and control and manipulation. And sadly, there's still too many people in this country who think that that's okay. People hear the truth and they stay silent. They look the other way. The survivors of Michael Jackson, James Safechuck, and Wade Robson, they bear witness in 4 hours of the most intense documentary you'll ever see, Leaving Neverland. And if you haven't seen it, you must see it. It's on HBO. Because yes, Michael Jackson, he had a lot of great music, and he did some incredible things, but the man was a serial pedophile, and everyone wants to look the other way. MJ, the musical, is on Broadway now. The creators had seen the documentary before they brought it to Broadway when they were in Chicago trying out the show. And they were quoted as saying, "Oh, this is going to make it a bit difficult now." But what did they do? They just changed the name to MJ. The original title was "Can't Stop Till You Get Enough." It's true. They went on to Broadway, and they came up with a quote: "We don't judge." What does that say to every survivor? I know what it says. It says, "Shh, be quiet." No one wants to hear it. Right now, they're making a big studio biopic about Michael Jackson. I hope that as child advocates, we will let our united voices be heard about how detrimental it is for child safety to glamorize a known pedophile. This is one of the few rooms where we can talk about this because, well, you can't leave. The doors have been locked. It's because you're open and you're compassionate people. But if you go other places and you say, "Hey, I want to talk about child sex abuse," they're like, "Okay, great, I'll be right back." So we have to do this by leading by example. We don't need everyone to do what Anthony Edwards does and go out publicly and say, "I'm a survivor." We just need to provide safe spaces for healing to begin and let men tell their stories. And some of those survivors I predict a lot will find their voice as advocates. And I guarantee you, more kids at 14 or 15, more kids will say, yes, something did happen to me. And that's where partnerships are important. And I look forward to what's happening here today. So for the last 16 years, we at 1 in 6 have helped men who have had abusive sexual experience lead healthier and happier lives by providing information and support resources. And while the impact of our work has been significant, we have always been a small organization that lacked the infrastructure to do more. That's why I am thrilled to announce today that 1 in 6 has officially merged with the Zero Abuse Project and is now under its umbrella of leadership. So thank you. I joined the board of Zero Abuse Project because I do deeply believe in its mission to protect children from abuse and a sexual assault, and to surround survivors with tools to rebuild their lives and create a future on their terms. I pushed to merge our organizations because Zero Abuse Project gets things done. And I want us all to do a lot more. With just 5 years under their belt, look at what they've accomplished. Millions in grants, tens of thousands of professionals trained, new tools for investigators, and new hope for survivors. From complex things as changing laws, which befuddle me, to things as simple as offering guidance to parents on how to have these conversations with their kids. Zero Abuse is making an impact. Every one of these actions matter, and I wanted 1 in 6 to be part of that energy and activism, and I want you to be a part of it as well. Isolation, that's the killer. That's what the perpetrator does. They isolate until you're all alone. But working together is the way we protect kids. If you care about this issue and you want to have an impact, I invite you to join us. You are not just protecting kids, you're changing the social structure and the way we understand abuse and how we end it. We can affect change. When I see your faces, your hearts, your minds, your nods of agreement, I know we'll get there together. And that's the most important. So thank you for that honor. Let's keep doing the work. Thank you for being here. You are now officially a part of the hope for change. And I can't wait to see what we look like in 10 years and where we're at. And pretty soon they're going to be unlocking the doors. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Let's thank Anthony Edwards for everything he has done to raise awareness, support, and healing for male survivors of abuse, and celebrate our new partnership with 1 in 6. Good afternoon. My name is Joelle Castex, and I am so proud to be the chair of the board of directors of Zero Abuse Project. I'm involved with Zero Abuse for a very simple reason. I've dedicated my life to making sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to another child. This is me. Between the ages of 15 and 17, I was repeatedly sexually assaulted by my Catholic high school choir director. What's worse is that school officials knew the entire time and did nothing. I like to refer to myself as Little Joelle here, because little Joelle is very different from the menopausal machine you see standing here before you right now. I had to struggle. To get justice and healing all by myself because there wasn't a Zero Abuse to help me when I needed it most. If there had been a Zero Abuse, my peers and I could have had the Empower Me program. We could have had it in elementary school, so we would have understood what abuse was, how to empower ourselves, and know that abuse is never the victim's fault. My teachers and other first responders could have graduated from CAST, our college and university program, and understood how victims like me need to be treated in a trauma-informed way. Zero Abuse's Center for Faith and Child Protection could have been the key to help faculty and church officials understand how devastating abuse is in religious organizations and the very unique trauma that abuse causes. When I was first struggling with coming forward, Survivor Space could have helped me get support anonymously. Little Joelle never got that opportunity, but now, as an adult, I have devoted myself to making sure that programs like these are the first line of offense against anyone who would dare hurt a child. Simply put, Zero Abuse is life-changing, and that's why we've invited you here. And that's why it is now my privilege to ask you to make a financial investment in the growth of this proven organization, because it's the most important investment you can make. Now that you've heard our story, we invite you to help us with what is needed most: financial support to protect children from abuse through education, training, prevention, and response. Because the demand from law enforcement, prosecutors, and educators far exceeds our current capacity and resources. Now, if the table captains could take their packets and pass out the materials inside to everyone seated at their table. And for those of you who don't have a table captain, there's a white envelope, and if you could pass out those materials. And thank you to all my table captains. There are many more prosecutors like Jenna, and there are many more advocates and survivors like me, and Anthony, and Jeff Dion, and Allison Faye, and Victor Veith, who can change children's lives nationally. But without your help, Zero Abuse Project cannot reach the people who need it most. That's why Zero Abuse created the Circle of Children's Heroes. And our heroes protect all children, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or socioeconomic status. So if you are inspired by what you've heard today, I invite you to consider becoming a member of our Circle of Children's Heroes. We created this circle in just December, and we are grateful that we already have 8 change makers who have stepped up to be children's heroes. We are grateful to each of you, and we hope that you'll be joined by others today. So starting at the top of your pledge form, if you need to get your readers, that's fine. The Hero Pledge levels give you a sense of what your contribution can do, and remember that your gift may be tax deductible. The first giving level is the Guardian Circle of Heroes, and this is a donation of $1,000 a year for 5 years. A gift at this level can provide 3 hours of prosecutor training or 8 hours of technical assistance. And this is the exact technical assistance that both Jeff Dion and Jenna spoke about earlier in this program. The next giving level is $5,000 a year for 5 years, and this is our Champion Circle of Heroes. A gift at this level can support thousands of survivors by providing 5 powerful support groups a week for an entire month. This is the kind of safe place that I yearned for when I was first coming forward and grappling with my abuse. Some of you may want to do more or have family foundations or donor-advised funds. We have a final giving level for you, and that's our Founder Circle of Heroes. And that's a pledge of $10,000 a year every year for 5 years. Your gift at this level will provide 3 months of the NOVA tool, helping hundreds of police departments nationwide to quickly identify predators with ready access to kids. Think of the impact that can make in preventing abuse. So if you're joining our Circle of Children's Heroes today as a new member, we are grateful for your generous support. But of course, many of you may prefer to give at a different level, and so we provide the next line just for you. On this line, please tell us how much you would like to give and for how many years. And we truly appreciate whatever level of support you give, and we ask that you make the first payment of your pledge today. And if you choose to give from a personal philanthropic fund, please note that when you might authorize that gift so that we can watch for it. There are more ways to help. Perhaps you want to connect Zero Abuse to another partner or a school. Or perhaps you would like to consider an in-kind gift. If so, please check the next box, the one that says, please contact me. I have other thoughts to share. I know many of you are still writing, but I would appreciate your attention for just a moment because it's really important that you hear what I have to say. Whatever gift you choose to make today, whether you become a children's hero, whether you give at a different level, but mostly because you gave us the gift of your precious time today, I would like to thank each and every one of you on behalf of the children and survivors that we serve. I'll give you some time now to finish filling out the pledge forms. When you're finished, please pass the envelopes back to your table captain. So on behalf of our partners in law enforcement and schools, on behalf of the survivors we serve, and on behalf of the children that we protect, thank you, thank you, thank you for growing our impact in size and geography. Thank you for helping us spread the word and for being ambassadors for the important work of Zero Abuse Project. Thank you for helping us launch a safer world for kids. And most important, thank you for the gift of your presence here today.
As you fill out your pledge forms, we are so grateful. Thank you. Thank you for the time you spent today. I want to thank you all for helping us to launch that safer world for kids. Anthony Edwards has generously agreed to stay after to meet with you if you'd like, to take photos, or you can take photos with anyone else you would like. You can meet him. There's a place we'll have for photos. There's our photographer, by the way. Drew is part of the Anderson family as well, Drew's son. So again, for all of our current elected officials and former elected officials who were recognized earlier, whether you are here or not, we'd like to get a photo with Tony as well, with Anthony Edwards. So you'll go after you're done. Would you raise your hand there, Drew? And will all the elected officials and the appointed ones and Patty Wetterling's group and the commissioner, all those folks join him for a photo with Anthony Edwards. Until then, all I can say is thank you. I am deeply moved by what you said today. Thank you for being here and being part of the cause.